contested case hearing testimony of Nelson Ho, witness for petitioner Lena Allah's Slight Home, with a date of December 26, 2016. And I imagine that the date doesn't mean anything, right? Based on what I heard.
Unfortunately, that date represents the death of a member in my family, so I stopped it there and attended to that. And then I heard Mrs. Slightholm's problems, and I didn't pursue it with her until much later in the process.
Okay, I understand, but for our purposes, and I'm sorry about your family member, for our purposes, this document, that date, December 26, doesn't mean anything.
It was the date I substantially finished the rewrite.
Okay, but substantially finished a document doesn't mean anything, right?
Okay.
So it's really when you completed it, and it sounds like it was February.
Yes, I sent it to her then.
All right, so please go forward with your 10-minute summary.
Sure. Thank you very much. My name is Nelson Ho, and I'm very pleased to be here. I'm honored to be here presenting information to this contested case hearing about my experiences with what I call the land mismanagement of Mauna Kea, pretty much from the inception of the 1965 lease. And as an aside, I do believe that the proposed 30-meter telescope should be built. It should not be built on Mauna Kea. I go through, well, let me start at the beginning. I first visited the mountain in 1975. It was very much less developed. In fact, there were no structures there. I went to Lake Waiau, and we observed ceremony there. In 1979, I was invited to the opening of the NASA infrared telescope. I had just moved over from Honolulu and was just really pleased to be up there. And at that time, I believe there was only one other structure there. In 1997, I was, because of my criticism of the way the mountain was being developed, I was invited by the university to attend the groundbreaking of the Smithsonian Institution. And I actually witnessed something at the luncheon afterwards that I felt was really disrespectful to the whole process, that the mountain was being rented out, and I can go into that detail later. I would say that there has been 50 years of unchecked ambition by the international astronomy industry that has unbalanced the proper management of the mountain and actually has made a mockery of the 8 criteria that were used as conditions for development. I think it unjustly enriched the University of Hawaii, maybe not in dollars, but certainly in prestige, in the ability to get grant money and attract more telescopes, which would get a more complete and better graduate program in astronomy. And that has affected both the ability of the university and DLNR to properly manage the mountain, though the effects of having so much dependent on the continued development of the mountain really distorted the decision-making process. So I'm glad we're able to put on the record through all the various testimonies what should have been done and the corrections possible to redress the situation. I began my involvement with the policy issues in May of 1995 when Sierra Club members called me saying that there was debris, construction debris, blowing into the natural area reserve blowing into the plateau area, which had shrines that were being impacted by rubbish. And so my first response was to contact then IFA Director Don Hall, and eventually, at first he just said, listen, that's just rubbish from the visitors who get out of their vehicles and the strong winds tear off their ball caps and take out their coffee cups. So I went up there after not visiting the summit for 4 years, and I was actually shocked by the amount of construction happening in 1995. And I noticed a lot of debris that included 50-gallon petroleum drums that were in gullies, probably blown there by the strong winds of the mountain. And actually went up there with Mr. Hall, and he agreed to clean up those areas and started to do so. I think eventually they took off truckloads of debris. And to prove that it was not the public that was creating this problem, I actually did a transect going out into the area of the shrines, just taking a straight line and a compass bearing, things that I had learned as a resource management technician working at Hawaii Volcanoes National Park. And just go out on a straight line and you pick up every piece of debris that you could find. And I brought that back to the Tribune Herald to raise the issue of proper management of the mountain. And this was in 1995, and it turned into a front page article in the Tribune Herald. I think I had to join with Mililani Trask, who was from Kalahui, Hawaii at the time, and the two of us spoke at many DLNR board meetings to try to get some redress. The response at one of the meetings was to allow practically unfettered access by commercial vehicles. And so hence we now have the huge problem of having so many commercial vehicles up there every night doing tours and really changing the character of the mountain. Because of my public involvement, I was appointed by the University of Hawaii President Kenneth Mortimer to serve on his Mauna Kea Advisory Committee from 1998 to 2000, where we put together the first master plan. The committee was led by UH professors Drs. Larry Kimura and Pilo Wilson, and eventually that committee declined to endorse a deeply flawed version of the master plan for observatory expansion. And the university consultants, Group 70 International, eventually completed the plan on their own and presented it to the Board of Regents. And at that time, there was a Board of Regents who threatened to resign over that plan. And I make the assertion that there has been institutional racism going on by the University of Hawaii. And I was not the first person to state that. This Board of Regent was. His name was Nainoa Thompson. And he got the plan substantially altered before the Board of Regents adopted it in 2000. I am alleging that that kind of institutional racism continues to this day, where the desires for continuing Mauna Kea as the premier astronomical observatory in the Northern Hemisphere takes precedence over the DLNR responsibilities to protect natural and cultural resources. And that goes to the diminishment of the value of the 8 criteria when it comes to increasing the number of telescopes on the mountain. Let's see. From 2003 to 2011, Sierra Club officially was part of a legal hui that went through that brought a federal lawsuit to compel NASA to complete the first federal EIS conducted on Mauna Kea for any of the observatories. And that resulted in the language of, and I'm moving ahead, significant, adverse, and substantial impact. And I quote from the findings, the cumulative impact of the past, present, and reasonably foreseeable astronomy developments have resulted in significant, adverse, and substantial impacts to the cultural and natural resources of Mauna Kea. And I cited it in my testimony, and that came out in July 2013. The reason for the imbalance is that the desires of the university and the DLNR were underpinned and pushed forward by by political decisions made by political leaders, and I named them in my amended complaint. I merely referred to them in the original one, and that
You're talking about the amended testimony.
Amended testimony. Thank you. That starts from Senator Dan Inouye, includes the various governors at that time, from John Burns through George Ariyoshi and on to Neil Abercrombie. And I point out that there was significant involvement by Larry Mihal, who was then the chair of the Department of Land and Natural Resources, and he actually got the criticisms quieted by the hunters and the environmentalists in the 70s, when he made it known that he wanted to see the telescope development continue at that early date. And to support that, I would point to, let's see, okay, let me go on to who were the early critics.
Mr. Ho, I'm
Yes.
sorry, but you're pretty much over with your 10 minutes.
Oh, my goodness.
So
Okay, I apologize.
If you'd like to take a minute to wrap up.
Yeah, I would just like to acknowledge the early critics of the mountain, which include Mrs. May Mull and her husband Bill Mull, who actually were part of the team that discovered the WECU bug. They brought a group of biologists up to the summit, where they were the first to look closely at the summit ecosystems and what was there at the summit, and discovered the WECU bug. So I'll let it rest at that.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Ho. Ms. Peixoto?
Okay, aloha Nelson, how are you?
I'm fine.
Okay. Let me ask you a quick question about Mr. Mihao. If you know, Mr. Mihao also, on the other side of the equation, also proposed that they cannot offer time on the telescopes in lieu of paying rent. So he was for paying rent, correct?
Oh, I didn't realize that.
Oh, sorry, okay.
I did not.
Okay, that's okay. Okay, so I want to ask you some questions about OMKM. is it your understanding that OMKM is, or is it your testimony actually, that OMKM is in a conflict of interest, serving both as a quote unquote the proponent of development and the one who's supposed to be tasked with protecting the mountain?
Absolutely in conflict. I was on the committee that discussed how the management should be done. And I'd like to note that there was a lot of criticism of having the OMKM focused on being the managing authority. Back in the year 2000, there were hundreds of people that came out and opposed the master plan before the Board of Regents, and I believe all of that was videotaped. Many, and I included, consider them just a facade of inviting, of having the management responsibility brought to the Big Island, when in fact it is an advisory body to the UH Chancellor, who then advises the UH President in Manoa as to what happens on the mountain. And if you look closely at who has been on the OMKM board, they all have all been either astronomers or members of the Chambers of Commerce that want further development on the mountain.
So how did you get on the Office of Mauna Kea Management's Environment Committee?
Oh, I actually did not. That was Deborah Ward.
Oh, okay.
We actually, years earlier, Sierra Club had tried to...
Excuse me, Mr. Ho.
Yes.
I need you to listen to the question and answer it directly, so I think you have answered it.
Thank you.
I know you have a lot of history and want to expand it, but we
Okay.
need to stay focused.
Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Peixoto?
Okay. Just trying to understand the time frame. You aren't on the Environment Committee, but you were actually on President Mortimer's original
That's correct. He
committee.
had invited me to participate.
With Larry
Kimura.
and Pila Wilson.
Correct.
At that time.
Correct.
Okay, so and then Mililani was on that, and Mililani was on that, correct?
She attended the meetings but did not want to officially be part of it.
Right. Do you know the history of her appointing me to go there, and was I allowed to sit on that committee?
Oh, yes, that is correct. I forgot that detail. Yes.
Right.
Yes.
But was I allowed to sit on that committee?
No, you weren't.
Yeah, okay, thank you. You say in, sorry. So, is it in your history of understanding of what's gone on, has OMKM ever reviewed or convened any hearings or meetings to review any of the previous findings of the contested case hearings, the NASA EIS, or and have they? Yeah, can you answer that question first?
Yes, I
Please
would.
do not answer. There's an objection.
Yes, Your Honor. I think the question lacks a foundation, and whether he actually knows, has knowledge about that.
Can you lay the foundation, Ms. Peixoto?
Yes.
And I also am concerned that it's beyond the written testimony, but lay the foundation if you're able.
Okay. Sierra Club, through Deborah Ward, is that correct, sits on the Office of Mauna Kea Management Environment Committee?
Yes.
Okay, so Deborah Ward must convene with Sierra Club when there's decisions to be made or issues to be decided on her positions also for the Office of Mauna Kea Management?
Yes, that's the normal process.
Okay. My question to you is, have you ever been consulted by Deborah Ward concerning any meetings that involve discussion about previous contested case hearings? In other words, what I mean by previous contested case hearings is, did they ever review any of the findings of those contested case hearings that you're aware of?
Yeah, first,
Just a minute, please. Mr. Kayama?
Yeah, Your Honor. I apologize, Kelo, but I'm confused, so I believe it's vague and ambiguous. I'm not sure what the question is asking.
I
Do
think
you
Nelson-
understand the question, Mr. Ho?
Actually, I do.
Okay, so I'm going
Yes.
to overrule the objection. Ask you to answer, please.
Yeah, first of all, Deborah Ward and I attend the main Office of Mauna Kea Management meetings where the Mauna Kea Management Board meets. The Environment Subcommittee does their work apart from that. But often in the main meetings, monthly meetings, we do discuss, what the issues were and what Sierra Club would like raised at different levels. And I can't give you the exact number of OMKM meetings, but it's been substantial, and there has never been, when I was there, any discussion about the results of contested case hearings or any of the other things that you had asked.
Any discussion on the previous court cases, such as OHA versus Sean O'Keefe in the Mauna Kea EIS?
The
cases?
director of OMKM, and that has changed, there's been several, sometimes would just report that they were present and that the result of the hearing was such and such. But I don't think it was a board action where they discussed any of those things substantively.
And Sierra Club was never called upon to give a presentation of those findings to the OMKM?
No.
Okay. Were they ever called upon to present the hazardous materials that were produced in the contested case hearing?
No, none of that.
And so OMKM, to your knowledge, has never convened anything to discuss what should be done about all of the sewage treatment and hazardous waste handling on Mauna Kea?
No, not in those meetings that I attended.
Okay. Do you know if those meetings are public under Chapter 91 and or Chapter 92?
There are public, and there's opportunity for the public to address the board, and their agendas are published before they meet.
Okay. Do you know if that's 91 or 92?
I do not.
Okay. Sorry, 1 second. Now, in the 2000 Mauna Kea Master Plan, do you recall approximately how many telescopes were projected in that plan for the future of Mauna Kea?
Well, yes. Prior to that master plan, it was 11 major and 2 minor telescopes.
Allowed. Mm-hmm.
And then with the adoption of that plan, it went to 13 with the opportunity to recycle sites. And it was actually opposed by Sierra Club because there was no limitations. You could keep recycling sites, and there would be construction going on for a long time, undetermined amount of time.
Mm-hmm. But where does the MMA come in, the millimeter array, the 90 telescope millimeter array?
Oh, that was a proposal that Sierra Club learned about and objected to in public. It was an array that eventually wound up down in Chile, where it's spread out even larger than the Smithsonian submillimeter array.
But wasn't that array a part of the 2000 master plan?
I think they wanted it to include it, but it took up so much space that I think it was quickly withdrawn.
And so also you're on page 6, you testify also the 6 to 10, it's actually 6 to 10, right? Outriggers, the Pan-STARRS, the Air Force telescope, and then now the TMT?
That's correct.
So are those all within the purview of the master plan?
Yes, my recollection, it was all possible under the 2000 master plan.
But the 2000 master plan was not approved by BLNR?
That's correct. I think it's a planning document for the university, and to this day, I don't understand why it was not adopted by DLNR.
Okay. Okay. I want to ask you this question. I'm trying to find the page where it is. I think it's on the. I think it's the last page. You say that there is an unacceptable pattern of practice allowed here in Hawaii, where Hawaii taxpayers is being cheated by the university system to pay for all the legal costs defending the TMT Corporation and all the foreign countries that use the summit landscape and public lands at lower elevations for their facilities. The public should not have to bear those costs.
Yes.
Can I ask you, how do you come to that conclusion?
Well, I've watched for years the university using Hawaii taxpayer monies to expand and justify the continued build-out of Mauna Kea. And the recent newspaper article about the cost of this proceeding at $2 million, and I think the clock is still ticking on it. It doesn't include the fact that the university has hired outside law firms outside of their own general counsel to attend and defend the university in these proceedings. So the total cost could double. And I would note that already the university has spent close to $5 million to defend their plans on Haleakala and on the Big Island prior to this expense.
And you cite 5 separate cases. I'll just summarize them real quickly. The federal court case that forced the first federal EIS for Mauna Kea telescope. That was the first to acknowledge the cumulative impact on Mauna Kea, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
The second one would be the state Supreme Court's December 2015 that ruled that the TMT's contested case here, the CCH, was invalid because, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
The third would be Judge Ibarra's ruling regarding the civil rights of the protectors that was violated.
That's correct.
Those were specifically over the rules established by BLNR maybe, or UH, I'm not really sure, over protest actions at Halepohaku.
That's correct.
And then the fourth is the defense necessity accepted by Judge Tanabe regarding the arrests and the protests at Halepohaku.
Yes, and I'd like to correct an error.
Okay.
It's actually Judge Barbara Takase.
Oh, sorry.
I also know Barbara Tanabe, so that was my error. So I'd like to correct that.
Yes, I got that. Okay. And then Judge Nakamura's ruling regarding vacating the consent for the sublease. Is that correct?
Yes.
So I'm naming these because you are saying that at least on 5 separate occasions the courts have ruled in favor of the civil rights of Native Hawaiians and cultural practitioners.
That's correct.
Okay.
And if I may expand on that, the reason I made this list was because I feel that the decision-making process within DLNR and the UH is so skewed to development that the only recourse that people have to correct this imbalance is through the judicial system. So I wanted to highlight the fact that these 5 cases all came down to try to redress what was happening on the mountain.
And is it your testimony that sorry, I was going to ask why. Let me rephrase it, okay? On page 8, you mentioned the cost of chronic mismanagement. So let me ask you, is it chronic mismanagement based upon the Office of Mauna Kea Management, your knowledge of it?
I would go further. I think DLNR has really been absent on active management of the mountain. They still have, I believe, the fiduciary duty, and they shouldn't be turning it over to a leasee to police all the protective measures that are in place for conservation district lands.
Right. So you're saying it's a function of DLNR and OMKM?
Yes.
Okay. You discuss management tokenism and redirecting blame onto the public. Okay. And you premise that by saying the flora and fauna inventories and monitoring promised since the mid-'80s have never been funded, even in the good times. So can you talk about some of that, and why is OMKM the one who's directing that?
Well, let's see. Back in 1983, there was a prior management plan,
Right.
and to get that plan passed through DLNR, they made promises to DLNR and the public to fund biological surveys, to understand what they were disturbing when they brought in more telescopes. That was never done until recent times. I'd say maybe as late as 2010 they weren't done. So there were biologists who had complained for years that the promised surveys and therefore mitigation measures were unknown. There was no baseline to what was being disturbed. And only now that is being done, and I think incompletely so.
Okay. And part of your testimony on page 11, you're specifically stating that there's willful neglect in looking at the questions of carrying capacity, constraints on human activity, and the ultimate build-out of the summit. Is that your testimony?
Yes, it is.
Okay.
If I may expand,
Yeah.
the issue of carrying capacity was brought up very early in the process in the 90s, where all these new telescopes were being built, some with after-the-fact permitting. And so Sierra Club and others had said, okay, let's find out what the constraints are. And so carrying capacities can have overlays of looking at what the cultural constraints are, the natural resource constraints, the constraints of what a good telescope facility needs to be built. And neither DLNR nor the university wanted to answer that question. So I believe to this date, no one has ever put a numerical limit on the number of telescopes that can be on the mountain.
But, I mean, you spoke about it earlier. There's that physical 13 limit, 11 majors, 2
Yes.
minors. And then,
Yes.
then that was still reasserted in the 2000 plan, right, that there's
Yes.
this 13 number?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So what you're saying is there's never been established a carrying capacity beyond those 13 limits. So
Yeah, okay.
is
Yeah.
that what I
Yes.
think that's what I'm hearing?
Yes.
Okay. And yet we're trying to move forward without even understanding the carrying capacity that has already been established
Yes.
in the past. All right. Okay. And you're speaking specifically with that there's a temptation of another 65-year lease
Yes.
coming to the rescue. So there's no need. You assert that there's no need, or you feel that people perceive that there's no need for adequate
Well,
planning or-
there's no need to answer that question because you have another 65 years to figure how to build out, how to keep adding more to the summit.
Okay. You, and would it also be your testimony that the numerical number is not enough for determining carrying capacity, that you actually have to look at the impact, because one telescope may be this, like this big, and then the TMT's like this big, right? So they can't be counted just as one individual one. Another one is the Smithsonian. Is that your testimony?
Yes, it is. If I can elaborate on that. The Smithsonian submillimeter array is actually the largest facility on the mountain if you look at the area that it impacts. And I remember Hawaiian Kupuna, who asked that the telescopes not be placed on Pu'upoliahu, and yet they were. And that upset many people. And if you look at it, there's a whole network of roads and giant forklifts that carry around these heavy individual telescopes. And it's Sierra Club's contention, and mine personally now, that each of them should be considered as having an impact on the landscape, but the system, DLNR and the university, look at it as just one facility. Never mind that it sprawls a half a mile out. You're putting new roads into possibly sensitive areas, and that federal money was used, and there was not a federal EIS, and therefore no consultations or any of the other requirements of federal EIS.
And that's because it was exempted, correct? From
Yes, it was exempted.
And who exempted that? If you remember.
I do not recall.
Okay. You talk about a moratorium as a is that a permanent moratorium, or at a minimum a cool down moratorium to have substantial discussion?
Yes, that's actually an official Sierra Club position that I helped pass.
Right. Okay.
But I don't reference it as such.
Okay, not as a, okay. Is it your testimony that there needs to be a limit at some point on any further development?
Absolutely. And I think I state that on page 1. Because we have not addressed the underlying issues, we shouldn't proceed any further. And in fact, I state in my testimony that a group of us, including yourself, met with a delegation from the TMT telescope at then President Chancellor Rose Sang's office.
Yes.
And we had a private meeting, and I think we shared all those concerns back in 2007 with them, that while they're obviously proposing a noble endeavor, they were going to meet with staunch opposition because the underlying issues surrounding Mauna Kea's management hadn't been addressed. And I think it is...
Excuse me, Mr. Ho, but
yes,
that's going kind of far from the initial question, which was, should there be a limit?
Yes, there should be a limit.
All right.
Just two more questions here. The last question I want to ask you is, when we did have that conversation with the presidents of Caltech and so on and so forth, and is it your feeling that that was not received very well, or as it was offered, our candidness? What was your overall feeling when we were done with that meeting?
I was disappointed because I knew they would proceed. And around the same time, if I may, that's when Dr. Peter Adler's report came out, which I referenced in my testimony,
Yes.
and essentially says the same thing, urges caution. And here we are today because the TMT has proceeded.
And that was Peter Adler was hired by Mr. Moore to look at the
To do a risk assessment, yes, on whether the TMT could be built.
Mm-hmm. And so, to summarize, the assessment was there were too many legal tripwires. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. All right. So, in looking at the findings of, well, first let me ask this. Are these the same people that were asked by Judge Mulway to either redo their EA or do an EIS in the OHA versus NASA case?
I believe some of them were. Mm-hmm. I don't recollect all of the participants.
Mm-hmm. But these universities, these California universities, are the same people.
University of California and California Institute of Technology, yes.
Okay. So they understood that or should have understood, that the cumulative impact on Mauna Kea was significant, adverse, and substantial.
Yes.
Correct. And is that, therefore, the limit? That it is adverse, substantial, and significant. I mean, it's gone over the limit, hasn't it? Because it's also substantial.
My understanding of that clause is that you don't proceed until you can reduce it to less than substantial, and then you would consider more development.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Thank you. I think that's all my questions.
Thank you.
Mahalo.
All right, let's take a 10-minute recess, please. Thank you, Mr. Ho. I remind you that the testimony you're about to give will continue under the oath you took earlier to tell the truth. Do you agree?
I agree.
Thank you. Mr. Ching?
Good morning, Mr. Ho.
Good morning, Mr. Ching.
We do know each other a little bit, don't we?
A little, I think so.
Okay, good. You've been testifying about astronomy and astronomy interests on the mountain quite a bit this morning. Have you been on the south side of the mountain?
Yes.
Have you been on the east side of the mountain?
Yes.
Have you been on the north side of the mountain?
Yes.
Have you been on the west side of the mountain?
Yes.
So you're testifying that you have been almost all around, or at least all around the mountain.
Yes, I've hiked and driven on all sides of the mountain.
So would you say that you have a pretty good grasp or feeling about what the mountain is all about?
Yes, I do, especially the natural attributes of the mountain.
You started talking about rubbish on the mountain blowing around
Yes.
and making some complaints about the rubbish on the mountain blowing around.
Yes.
And you got people to respond to your complaints, and maybe you and maybe others of your complaint, and things were cleaned up.
Yes.
Was all of the rubbish taken off the mountain?
Well, there's more created all the time. But back then in 1995 and subsequent years, truckloads of industrial debris and other trash that the public brought up was removed.
Was all the trash removed from the mountain?
I doubt it.
Where might some of this trash have ended up?
Well, I witnessed PVC pipes degrade under the intense ultraviolet light, so that they actually became the size and shape of potato chips. You'd have a linear pipe that could be 2 inches, 3 inches, 4 inches in diameter, and several feet long, and it would degrade into little chips laid out in a linear fashion. And I doubt all of those were picked up, as an example. And you know, the winds can be over 100 miles an hour. I've heard they can tear apart a Matson container and distribute it all over the mountainside. I've heard construction crews tell me they've seen a stack of 4x8 sheets of half-inch or thicker plywood just lifted off and thrown around the job site like they were a deck of cards. I know I've picked up rubbish with the names of the astronomical facilities on bill of lading, receipts, things like that.
I see. Do you have any knowledge of the burial of rubbish on the mountain?
Burial of rubbish, that was first an issue on Pu'uhauoki, where the Subaru telescope, and I believe the Kex, are located. I was up at a field trip that Miss Debbie Ward has referenced, that she, myself, Dr. Fred Stone, one of the entomologists who studied Mauna Kea, went there, and he was appalled that the inner cinder cone of Pu'uhauoki had been filled in and smooth. And when he studied it, it was prime Wekyu habitat, and it was to be left alone. And I think he later told me he found out that rubbish had been buried at the bottom of the crater, and it was filled over.
Do you know or not whether the burial of this rubbish was legal or not?
I doubt it was. I doubt it. I don't know for sure.
Okay. Now, you were questioned about the carrying capacity of the mountain, is that correct?
Yes.
And I believe you testified, for instance, that there might be a better way of enumerating the impacts of telescopes on the mountain?
Yes.
And that you, were you suggesting, for instance, that the impacts be tied more into the size of the facilities rather than just plain integral numbers?
Oh, absolutely.
So why do you think they decided on just using numbers of telescopes? In other words, making a 1 meter telescope, for instance, equivalent to a 30-meter telescope.
Well,
why did they do that? Do you know?
Well, I could speculate. I wasn't there at their decision.
In this hearing, we cannot
excuse
speculate.
me, Mr. Kayama. All right, no speculation, please. Mr. Ching?
I agree, and I believe Mr. Ho agrees also. Changing the subject a little bit. Now, telescopes are sitting in the conservation district, is that correct?
That's correct.
And as a part of that, they're also in the astronomy subzone. Is that correct?
I don't know that there is an astronomy subzone.
Really? Now, why would you say that?
Because I don't know. I don't know if there are definitions for an astronomy subzone. I know that the conservation rules allow an astronomy facility to be put in a conservation district.
I see. And then you mentioned the Smithsonian sub-millimeter
Yes,
array,
yes.
and that it was a federal undertaking.
Yes.
So did they, for instance, do a 106 consultation?
I do not believe so.
And I believe you said something about the some of the rules in that facility were exempted.
That's my understanding.
I see. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Ching. Professor Flores?
Hello, Mr. Ho. My name is Ikalani Flores, representing the Flores case Ohana.
Aloha.
I want to, in your testimony, you make mention of that you are the Deputy Director for the Department of Environmental Management under Mayor Harry Kim. Is that correct?
Yes, from 2004 to 2008.
What were your responsibilities in that particular position?
Oh, everything from safety to approving contracts to making sure that the wastewater division was functioning properly, collecting billings, the whole gamut. I hired and fired individuals who were working with the department, so I had disciplinary responsibilities. I gave testimony before the councils when requested, and I attended grievances on behalf of the department.
And so, would you say your qualifications and your experience in that particular position gives you a basis for your experience and knowledge in your testimony today?
Yes, I hope so.
I know you made mention in both oral and written testimony that you served on UH President Kenneth Mortimer's Mauna Kea Advisory Committee. Is that correct?
Yes, it is.
What was the purpose of this particular advisory committee?
To come up with a master plan for the future use of Mauna Kea by the University of Hawaii system.
And who else served on that particular committee, do you recall?
It was a large committee. I don't recollect all the individuals. There was one cultural practitioner from Kauai. I remember her participation. Of course, it was co-chaired by the two professors that I had mentioned. But I don't remember the individual participants at this point.
And what at the end of the committees, I'm assuming the committee was active for a particular period and it ended after a particular time period?
That's correct. And we could not come to an agreement as to what to propose for a master plan. The advisory committee actually turned down what the consultants, Group 70 International, came up with. And then we were disbanded. And the consultant took the master plan and revised it and presented it to the Board of Regents at some later time.
So in the end, well, to clarify what you just said, so what was the outcome of the advisory committee at the end of these several years in looking at the master plan? What was the final outcome? Is that
That we could not come to a mutual agreement as to what to recommend to the Board of Regents.
okay? Now, was this in the, so when you're referring to the master plan, is this the in reference to the Mauna Kea Science Reserve Master Plan of 2010?
No,
I mean, not 2010, but 2000?
2000, yes.
So, and so, do you know if this master plan of 2000 for the Mauna Kea Science Reserve, was it to replace a previous plan?
Yes, the 1983 plan that DLNR had approved.
Okay. And you stated that the BNR didn't approve this 2000 master plan. Is that correct?
That's my understanding, yes.
And has there been any, to your knowledge, any revisions or updates to this 2000 master plan since it was first approved by the Board of Regents?
There was only one, and as a result of litigation, the comprehensive management plans, sub-plans, were put into that process. That's the only one that I'm aware of.
So going back to the question, so was there any revisions or updates to the 2000 master plan?
That's the only one that I'm aware of.
You're saying
The comprehensive management
is
plan.
that part of the master plan or is that separate from the master plan?
I actually don't know. I think it's a subset, but I could be corrected.
And you're referring to the comprehensive management plan?
Correct.
For Mauna Kea? Okay.
Correct.
So I'm going to make reference to Exhibit B37, which is actually the master plan of 2000 on page A1. And there's a paragraph in the opening of this master plan. Once again, Exhibit B37, the Mauna Kea Science Reserve Master Plan of 2000. And I'm going to read part of the opening statement under the title of Master Plan Adoption as a reference for foundation. It states, on June 16, 2000, the University of Hawaii Board of Regents adopted the following document, the Mauna Kea Science Reserve Master Plan, as the policy framework for the responsible stewardship and use of university managed lands on Mauna Kea through the year 2020. So based upon your knowledge, did the Board of Regents, is this statement correct to the Board of, based upon your knowledge?
Yeah, I believe it is.
And so the University of Hawaii Board of Regents did adopt this particular plan, is that correct?
Yes, they did.
And so if this particular plan is only goes through the year 2020, based upon your calculations, how many more years is left on this particular master plan?
Oh, how many left for the 2000 master plan?
If it goes through 2020?
Yeah, 3 years from today.
Okay. And so when you folks started your preparations for this particular master plan, how many years in advance did you guys start with in preparing to look at and formulate a master plan? I mean, updating the 1983 master plan, right? So
Yes.
how many years what years were you on the committee, I should say?
Yeah, 98 to 2000. 1998 to 2000.
And it took you about 2 years to kind of meet together, formulate, to go over?
Yes. The process was the consultant would draft something up, put it before the committee, and then we would hash out the contents, agree, disagree, ask for modifications.
Okay, and so based upon your experience in going through the first process, it's fair to say that if this master plan needs to be updated or replaced with a new master plan following 2020, that at some point in time soon, that type of process will need to begin. Is that fair to say?
Yes, it would be better if it's not rushed and that, the committee be given significant input.
Okay, so if we look at these various plans that have been designated for the management of Mauna Kea. I'm going to strike that sentence, and I'm going to rephrase what I'm going to state. So based upon your testimony, and I'm going to ask for based upon your experience and knowledge in this planning process here of this particular master plan, and your involvement with this particular master plan as being on the advisory committee. So even though this particular master plan of 2000 wasn't adopted by BLNR, is the University of Hawaii still obligated to comply with the guidelines set forth in it?
My understanding is that they're still obligated, the university.
And that is because the Board of Regents adopted this plan. Is
That's
that correct?
correct. That's my understanding.
Okay, thank you. So this so bringing it back to this particular project, the 30-meter telescope project. So the foundation, are you aware that the 30-meter telescope, if it was constructed, the lifespan of this project would go beyond 2020?
Yes. Yes, the lifetime of a telescope facility, yes.
And so wouldn't it be pertinent that this is another plan that needs to be seriously looked at by the university to be updated to address this particular TMT project?
Yes, there was a site reserved for the next generation telescope, and I believe the TMT was put in there, but at the time there was no knowledge of what kind of impacts this facility, a proposed facility, would have. So all the discussions were highly theoretical, and a lot of decisions were held in abeyance until detailed information could be gotten. And I don't think, to my knowledge, that discussion ever took place with regard to the 2000 master plan.
Okay, thank you. And are you aware that there are specific design guidelines in this particular 2000 master plan that addresses the visual impacts of this next generation large telescope?
Yes, there was design guidelines and a subcommittee of engineers and designers who would review telescope proposals as it came up.
And so, based upon your knowledge of this master plan, would the university as well as the TMT project be obligated to follow these particular design guidelines that's stipulated in this Mauna Kea Science Reserve Master Plan of 2000?
Yes.
Okay. Now, also looking at on your testimony, you make mention of the master lease, and you state that it expires, you make mention of a lease that expires in December 31st, 2033. Do you know what the particular lease you're referring to?
Yes.
And what would that lease be?
That would be the master lease given by DLNR to the University of Hawaii system in 1965.
And is that the same lease also sometimes referred to as a general lease?
Yes.
You also mentioned there's also another lease for the facilities at Halipohaku that expires in 2041. Is that correct?
Yes.
Now, based upon your experience and knowledge, do you know what has transpired regarding this particular issue with the lease? If we're referring to as the master lease or the general lease?
Well, yes. I think it was brought up during the first contested case hearing and at other hearings that the TMT wanted to extend or have a new lease in place so they could operate beyond 2033.
And do you know what the status of that at this moment?
I believe it's all on hold. There's been no discussions with the public about any lease beyond 2033.
Do you know if it's been on hold because then the university is requested to do, not requested, but is required to do an environmental impact statement on this particular?
I know they were supposed to do one if they had another master lease, and I don't know the status of that EIS.
Okay, thank you. Now, regarding EISs, on page 3 of your written direct testimony, under the heading of significant adverse and substantial impacts, you make reference to this particular lawsuit regarding the NASA Outrigger project. And you stated that it was compelled to complete a federal environmental impact study.
Yes, I state that.
Is it an environmental impact study or environmental impact statement?
Statement is the more correct term.
Okay. So what's the difference between a federal EIS and one that's required by the state?
Well, the federal one is under NEPA, the National Environmental Protection Act, and the state EIS laws are under HEPA, the Hawaii Environmental Impact Statement laws. And actually there are differences, and if I may, one of the points that the state has that is stronger is to look at alternatives. And Sierra Club has stated in public, and I've stated in public personally, that the alternatives discussion in the TMT EIS should have been a lot more rigorous than they were.
Okay. And what do you mean a lot more rigorous?
That instead of just a cursory review of the no option build for Hawaii, there could have been serious discussions about the alternative sites. And to my knowledge, that was not done then.
Okay. And is it from that particular federal EIS for this particular proposed project, is that where the reference to the cumulative impacts as being significant, adverse, and substantial?
Yes, it was.
Okay. And that was towards, that was to the cultural and natural resources on Mauna Kea, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. So I know you made reference to in the Peter Elder report. Do you know the title of that particular report?
Yes, I did reference it, and I can look it up. It's Peter Adler, and yes, it is titled Assessment of Risks for Siting the 30-Meter Telescope on Mauna Kea, dated October 26, 2007.
And do you know who it was contracted by?
Yes, the Gordon Moore Foundation.
Okay. And why would is it Gordon and Betty Moore Foundation?
I believe so.
Why would that particular foundation contract a report as such?
Well, because they had, that foundation had given the largest scientific grant ever, I believe, of 200, I've heard 200 or $250 million in total, and they wanted to know whether that was a good allocation of their funds. So Mr. Adler, who has, I think, an international reputation for dispute resolution, and he had previously lived in Hawaii and practiced land use planning, I believe he was in Colorado at the time, but the foundation contacted him to do a risk assessment for them.
So,
Yes.
And so, where was this money from the Moore Foundation going towards?
I believe for planning and construction of the TMT.
Okay. There's a few more questions. Okay, on page. Let me see. On page 5 of your written direct testimony, there's a heading where it says Sierra Club response. So it states here that the Sierra Club has spoken out against land mismanagement on Mauna Kea since the early 1970s. Is that correct to your knowledge?
That's correct.
And in what capacity has the Sierra Club has made their expressed their comments to in regards to this?
Well, we're a national environmental advocacy group, and we have a chapter that covers all of Hawaii and groups that operate within each county or each island. And so at different times, both the Hawaii Island Group and the state chapter have taken positions opposing further development.
And is there a particular reason why?
Because we felt that the decision-making for the management of the mountain was skewed and improper against the state laws.
Okay. And then you also have another heading here on that same page 5 of your written direct testimony entitled Community Opposition from Day One. And you state that it's a common misconception.
That's correct.
That no Hawaiians or other islanders expressed concern about the development on Mauna Kea. Is that summarize what the statement you said?
Yes, yes, it is.
And so people, I think, is this reference to many people today who are asking, or why hasn't people spoken up previous to this TMT project about their concern about the overdevelopment of Mauna Kea?
Yes, it is a direct response to that kind of assertion.
And can you provide examples of such public displays regarding the overdevelopment of Mauna Kea?
Well,
prior to this TMT project?
Yes. There have been many at official hearings where hundreds of people came out.
Excuse me, Mr. Ho. If I might ask Professor Flores, why is this relevant? I mean, I know the issue has been discussed. There is no empirical evidence. In other words, actual numbers of who showed up when and where. And furthermore, I don't see why it's relevant to the 8 criteria. So I know that it's come up before. I don't see this going anyplace, honestly, in terms of weight to be given to this issue.
I think that the weight to the issue is that when you go towards the somewhat almost 50 years of history of the management, or in this case mismanagement of the lands of Mauna Kea under the auspices of the university, that this project, the TMT project, is not just all of a sudden there's a concern being brought forth. I'm trying to lay down the foundation. The concerns regarding this mismanagement of Mauna Kea has been historically ongoing, and that the TMT project is just one more of what has previously happened.
So it appears from the evidence, including Mr. Ho's testimony, that you're correct that the opposition to telescopes, issues of concern regarding TMT have been ongoing for many years.
Yes.
Your question, I think, is, or at least the witness is starting to go into how many people showed up at what meetings. So the numbers are where I have a bit more confusion about why it's relevant, because there's no evidence that I've seen so far that shows, well, we did a survey monkey to show this many people are in favor, or this many people believe this, or this many people object, etc. It's not, I don't see how it's relevant. The fact
Okay.
that it's ongoing for a long time, I get that.
Okay. And maybe I'll withdraw that particular question and just move on with another question into this regard, if that's possible.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Your Honor. So, why, I mean, why have people been concerned about the overdevelopment of Mauna Kea in its past history prior to this TMT project?
Why is because the system has not reacted to the many years of criticism of the way decisions were made in the past. So I believe it's escalated to the point where you have 31 people arrested, and should this proposal go forward, I believe that there will be more of that kind of actions in the courts as well as in the streets.
And when you refer to the system, what system are you referring to?
The state system, that DLNR, and even the feds, whether they, the National Science Foundation grants more money or not, to actually the university and DLNR.
And so, based upon your knowledge and experiences, that who is the lessor of these lands of Mauna Kea?
The lessor is DLNR. They are entrusted what I call crown lands. I don't think anything has been ceded.
Okay, and I'm going to follow up with that. So,
Somebody else will follow up with
Yeah.
that.
and so does the BNR, which is a representation of the state of Hawaii, so do they have a legal obligation to protect these conservation district lands?
Yes.
Okay. And then as the lessee, is at the University of Hawaii?
Well, DLNR has historically delegated those responsibilities to the University of Hawaii
As the lessee.
as the lessee. And
And as the lessee, does the University of Hawaii also have a legal obligation to protect these conservation district lands?
yes.
And that's all, Your Honor. Thank you.
Thank you,
Mr. Ho.
Professor Flores. Mr. Kayama for Cahill.
Thank you, Your Honor. Good morning, Mr. Ho.
Good morning, Mr. Kayama.
I want to ask, based on some of the questions that were asked to you by Mr. Kalani Flores, I had some follow-up questions. So as I understand it correctly, the 2000 management plan that you were discussing was approved by UH Board of Regents,
Yes,
but not approved by the state agency, the BLNR.
I believe that's not been done yet.
Okay. Why is that significant in your mind? Or is it significant in your mind?
Well, I think it's significant. I think legally it has significance beyond my ability to explain.
Okay.
But I always questioned it that the 1983 master plan was done by the DLNR, and why isn't this next one also done?
Okay.
And haven't gotten a response.
All right, thank you. You also talked about, and if I understand you correctly, you said at the time, of course, the 2000 management plan mentioned the possibility of additional telescopes.
Yes, it did.
But at that time, the TMT itself specifically was not contemplated.
It was not on the horizon. There was a site reserved for the next generation telescope.
Okay. And again, you were part you were on some of those committees that eventually resulted in the management plan. Is that correct, my understanding?
Well, actually, no.
Oh, I'm sorry.
We
Please correct me.
discussed a master plan, but the one that the committee could not get behind, the one that the consultants had finally worked on and did not approve it and disbanded without approving it or finishing it.
Okay. And I think you mentioned it, but it seems to me then if the TMT itself was not contemplated, then the impacts of the TMT, of course, could not have been considered or contemplated by the management plan. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay, the specific details.
Yes.
The construction of it, the size of it, the amount of excavation that would occur, the amount of displacement of land, and other impacts, including impacts on the vacuole bug, if any, other natural resources. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And with your understanding, why is it significant that you're discussing the management plan and the fact that the management plan did not include the TMT?
Well, because it ignored, I think, a essential component of master planning is to know what the carrying capacity is. What are you planning for, and how do you know when you have to stop? And how do you know what the constraints are? And the university nor DLNR ever really dealt with that issue. They just said, here's a short-term license to proceed, and they both did.
Okay. And again, in your written direct testimony, you spoke about your position as a Department of Environmental Management from 2004 to 2008 under then Mayor Harry Kim and now Mayor Harry Kim. Is that correct?
Yes, I was deputy director.
Okay. And in addition to that, you've been a longstanding member of the Sierra Club, and you have participated in many environmental proceedings.
Always as a volunteer since 1981.
Okay. Explain to me, Mr. Ho, in your experience, based on your experience, what is the significance of the lack of contemplating the specifics of the TMT in the management plan to the current proceedings and, if any, to the CDUA application? Why is it? I'm not exactly sure what's the connection between those.
Well, the connection is that the decision makers could not really make a fair decision, and it was flawed, and as a result, we have civil unrest with regard to this, which I think is damaging the prospects of a very good scientific instrument from ever seeing first light on Mauna Kea.
I see. So that's part of the reason why you wrote in your written testimony about the legal processes that have taken place and how the legal processes really have been the last course of protecting on behalf, if I may say. Is that it?
Yes, I stated that.
And I think Mr. Kalani Flores covered most of the questions I had, so thank you, Mr. Holm.
Thank you.
Thank you, Your Honor.
Thank you, Mr. Kayama. Mr. Fergestrom?
Hi, Nelson.
Aloha.
I'm Hanale Fergstrom. I just have a few questions for you. So are you aware of Governor Ige's promise that if TMT gets built, it'll be the last one on the mountain?
Could you restate that, please?
Yes. Are you familiar with a statement from Governor Ige stating that if TMT is allowed to be built, it'll be the last one for the mountain.
I heard that it would be the last new site that would be allowed to be developed from Governor Ige, yes.
On your, in your written direct testimony on page 1, the first paragraph, it says that widespread community opposition to the TMT and other telescope projects waiting in line behind it. And then you mentioned the Canada-France upgrade. You know that for a fact, so that would go against what EA said, is that correct?
Well, technically, no. Yeah, you're referring to the high dynamic range 10-meter telescope, which is an upgrade, and supposedly it's within the same footprint of the existing building, although they would make alterations to the building.
Do you know of others behind it?
The master plan left open more what they called recycling of sites. And my reason for concern about that was because the existing Gemini telescope is actually a recycled site, but they took a location of a 24-inch telescope and put in an 8-meter telescope in its place. So technically that's recycling, but to me it's a major change in the landscape and additional industrial impact.
You state on page 2, your bottom paragraph, second sentence, it says, in 1998, the state auditor, Mrs. Marion Higa, found the following problems with UH and DLNR, oversight on Mauna Kea. And it reads that over 30 years have passed since construction of the first telescope on Mauna Kea. During this period, little was done to protect its natural resources. The university, as the leaseholder, should have provided sufficient protection to the natural resources and controlled public access and use. These requirements have not been adequately met. The Department of Land and Natural Resources, in its role as landlord, should have overseen university activities and enforced permit conditions and regulations in protecting state interests. Neither state agency has been proactive in maintaining the conservation districts. The university has failed to manage these lands. Is that a correct reading of that statement?
Yes, it is.
To your knowledge, has much changed from the way the state auditor looks at how Mauna Kea is being managed right now?
Well, there was a follow-up audit. But in my way of thinking, there are still structural flaws to the way Mauna Kea is managed.
Do you know that under Article 12, Section 7 of the Constitution of the State of Hawaii, it has additional protections for the Native Hawaiian culture and traditional practices?
Yes, and I know the state Supreme Court referenced that extra protection.
Okay. So would it be fair to say that the Hawaiian is like the environment, or they are part of that environment, on Mauna Kea?
Yes, and an example would be CAHEA, which is the Hawaiian Environmental Alliance, which is present here today as an organization.
Do you think that the BLNR and University of Hawaii spends more time protecting the rights of, or whatever you could say, the interest of the astronomy people over that of the Native Hawaiians and the general public?
It could be seen that way, yes.
And yet astronomy is not a recognized right given to us in the state, yes?
Don't really understand that question.
Well, Hawaiians are protected under Article 12, Section 7 of the Constitution. Do you know of a particular right that the state of Hawaii, the astronomy people have for the mountain?
No.
Okay. I think that's all I have for you. And thank you, Nelson. It's very nice to see you, and thank you all for the hard work that you do for all these years.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Fergerstrom. Ms. Kihoy?
Aloha.
Aloha.
Nelson.
Aloha.
Mahalo for being here today and for all of the work that you've done throughout the years in protection of our Mauna. A lot of the questions that I had have already been asked, so I just have a few. And forgive me if those have already been asked also. I'll try my best. What, to your best knowledge, is the history of the astronomy facilities on Mauna Kea? Have they been responsible and respectful tenants on the Mauna?
You know, I would like to say it depends on the facilities and the times. I think the early years, I think there was a little more respect, and when the University of California and Caltech came in, I think the tenor changed, and the race to really stay number one in the world as a premier site really took over. But from day one, I must say there were people on island who really objected to any industrialization of the summit. And back then, Mrs. May Mall called it urbanization of the summit. And to me, it looked so industrial to have those facilities there, and with all their generators and diesel fumes and noise. It's really a polluted environment. And yet I love astronomy, so I really enjoy the science that's produced there.
Mm-hmm. When was the first time you went up to Mauna Kea?
1975, I believe.
And were there any telescopes at that time?
Let's see. I actually went up to Lake Waiau, and we did sort of a little ceremony there. We may have gotten to the top. I vaguely remember one or two facilities there.
Can you describe the feeling for those of us who have never experienced that before?
Well, back then it was a lot more arduous to go up there. You couldn't go up there in two-wheel drive. It wouldn't make it up the switchbacks and the summit plateau. And so we were in a group that had access to four-wheel drive. And we had stopped at what's now called the lower staging area and walked up to Lake Waiau and enjoyed that natural resource. And then I'm sure we drove up to the Kukahau'ula, the summit ridge, and took a view there and stopped to enjoy that.
would you have ever thought that you would one day see 13 telescopes as you do now?
No, I did not.
And how has it affected your life? Seeing only 2 in your first trip that were rather small, and now seeing what it's become.
Well, I guess I'm very disappointed as to how it was done and why it was done. I wish it could have been developed differently.
Were you ever invited to participate in any of the opening ceremonies of the astronomy facilities on Mauna Kea?
Yes, in my testimony I referenced 2, which was the NASA infrared telescope, which I got invited to soon after I moved over from Oahu, and then the Smithsonian Institution's groundbreaking. And I'd like to point out there was one incident where we all went to lunch at the UH campus, and very light, I think a mean joke was made to the university and to the people of Hawaii, where a Smithsonian Institution administrator handed to Mr. Don Hall a jar full of pennies, 100 pennies, and he said he was making the next installment for his rent for the use of the Smithsonian Institution. And I thought that was really an affront. And I know it was meant in jest, and I know why it's $1, but still it was a devaluation of the significance of the mountain to the rest of the state and the islanders and the Hawaiians.
I find that rather insulting as well. But that's all the questions that I have. Mahalo, Uncle Nelson.
Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Kihoi. Mr. Hashida? Mr. Vicente?
Dwayne Vicente, good morning.
Aloha.
Aloha. On page 9 of your testimony, you mentioned about the master lease. Are you aware that the master lease is defective?
In what manner? I don't understand that question.
Are you aware that the master lease relies on appointed Governor Fear's proclamation of 1909, claiming that Mauna Kea is a forest reserve?
I understand that during the territory days it was labeled a forest reserve.
Are you also aware that the mention of the word demised lands in the lease?
I don't recall reading those words.
On page 10, you mentioned the Hawaiian Kingdom.
Yes.
Are you aware that 1875 King Kalakaua signed the Reciprocity Treaty with the United States?
I know that there were several treaties signed with different countries. I don't know that specific one.
Are you aware that the Reciprocity Treaty that King Kalakaua signed in 1875 was a treaty to occupy this kingdom by the United States?
No, I do not know that.
Do you know that the 1887 amendment to the 1875 Reciprocity Treaty was to have the U.S. Navy stationed at Pearl River, which we all refer to as Pearl Harbor today?
I don't know that specific document. I do know that the Navy occupied Pearl Harbor in
Peter?
that era.
Is the Navy still here today?
Yes,
Are you aware?
Yes, they are.
Are you aware in
Oh, I'm sorry, pardon me, Mr. Kayama.
Your Honor, I'll just, maybe if I can enter a standing objection. I know Mr. Vincente has been allowed to ask a number of these questions, but I just wanted to, I don't know, make a standing objection that this might be on the scope of his written direct testimony. And I know he's been doing this, so just for the record.
Mr. Vicente?
Well, this proceeding is based on Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution. If you was to read Cy versus Clinton 778 Federal Supplement, page 1, he went to the right jurisdiction, which is the United States District Court in the District of Columbia, but he was stumped when he came across Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2, the political question, which they always refer to. Well, Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 political question is limited to Article 5 of the Northwest Ordinance and doesn't extend beyond that, because in 1898, the magic that brought on the illusion that Crown and government lands was magically annexed to the Ohio River Valley, which is Article 5 of the Northwest Ordinance, it was just an illusion put into people's minds to create a false jurisdiction. And it continues to today. That's why we have all this federal administrative process. You have public lands. You have Hawaiian Homes Commission Act. All these false jurisdictions are created under the Northwest Ordinance, which is Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution. And that's why I believe that we need a stay in this proceeding until that issue is resolved in a federal court, which has a proper jurisdiction over that issue.
So there's an objection, as I'm sure you know what the objection is. It's immaterial, irrelevant, particularly based on my earlier decision that the focus of this hearing was going to be the 8 criteria.
Even the 8 criteria is based on Article 4, Section 3, Clause 2 of the U.S. Constitution, which raised the federal questions which you have no jurisdiction over.
Yes.
And that's why I'm asking for a stay. It probably won't be me taking them up to the federal court in D.C. because I have no means nor the skills. It'll be someone, though. It won't be me.
I understand.
But that's a standing question that it affects this proceeding.
I understand your objection. I understand your pursuit of these issues. This particular witness, however, is probably not going to help you very much.
I know. I've been questioning people in this room, and the only person I haven't questioned so far is you. So I don't know if that would be appropriate to question if you know or have read the Northwest Ordinance of 1787.
Perhaps you don't remember when you questioned me. That was back at the YMCA.
Maybe.
That was last summer. And I'm pretty sure I didn't answer. But
there was nothing in the record. The Northwest Ordinance didn't become part of the record yet.
Well,
it's in the library right now. So.
It's in the reference, it is in the records based upon your questioning. Everything you said was recorded. So nonetheless, I do have to ask you to move to another issue that is material or relevant.
I think I'll end with that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Vicente. Mrs. Freitas?
Aloha, Cindy Freitas. Aloha, Mr. Ho.
Aloha.
You have mentioned to Kealoha about the baseline of disturbance on the area where the existing telescope sits, and only in 2010 it was addressed. Is there more Analyzing of research should be done today, knowing that there is new structures like altars, ahus, shrines, etc., arising today.
Well, I know that they're arising. I know that there is further biological studies that could be done, and I know some are being undertaken now.
Okay, thank you. You had mentioned to Mr. Flores about the lease, the general lease, which is the 1955 and the 1968. Is that correct?
1965, yes.
65, sorry.
Yes.
And in the 1965, or before I go there, do you feel or do you have knowledge that the whole Mauna Kea is antiquity? It's an antiquity area, like shrines, structure, prehistoric things up there.
I've tried to visit a lot of the shrines that I've been told existed, and I have visited quite a few of them. And they encompass all four compass sites. I mean, northwest, east, south. I have seen shrines. I have seen burials. So I know that the Hawaiians utilize a lot of that mountain.
So, in your opinion, would you say mostly it's the whole Mauna Kea?
Yes, I believe they used all of it.
Thank you. So, in the 1960, the new general lease, number S-4191, which was signed in June 21st, 1968, between the parties, which is Board of Natural Resources and the UH, and it expires 2033. And I just want to know in here, and I'll read it to you on page 3, the leasee, in consideration of the premises, governs with the lessor as follows. And there's numbers telling which hunting, general liability, etc. Well, number 12, it says objects of antiquity. The leasee shall not appropriate damage, removal, excavation, disfigure, disface, or destroy any objects of antiquity, prehistoric ruin, or monument of historical value. In your opinion, has this been done on Mauna Kea?
Yes, there has been a lot of disfigurement and alteration of Hawaiian shrines, and I understand it continues to the present day.
So in your opinion, between the two parties, most of these issues that I have stated has not, we have been voicing it, but it still has not been addressed, in your opinion?
Yes, from 1968 to now. And in fairness, I don't think the signers of the lease back then could anticipate what the industry of astronomy has turned into. But yes, I read the original lease and saw that they were to return it in good condition back to the state at the end of the lease.
And you had mentioned, although those people had signed it in 1968, did not anticipate it today, but those who are in charge today should have seen it today. Is that correct?
Yes.
Thank you. I have no more questions.
Thank you, Ms. Freitas. Mr. Sanderson?
As a courtesy, Your Honor, I would appreciate it if you could take a lunch break at this time so we could further prepare for cross, particularly in light of this morning's discussions.
Okay, it's 11:50. We can break till 12:50. However, may I ask if Ms. Slightholme is going to be here this afternoon? Yes? Would you mind coming to the microphone?
I'll be here this afternoon.
And I think we have a couple of guests that maybe we did not recognize.
My children?
They're sitting behind you.
Yeah, they've come before, but they're here again today. So that's Kahanu
And they're welcome.
Kahaili.
And their names are?
Kahanu and Kahaili.
Welcome. So we'll take a lunch break until 12:50, please.
Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Ho. I remind you that the testimony you're about to give will continue under the oath you took earlier to tell the truth. Do you agree?
Yes, I agree.
All right, thank you. Mr. Manat, pardon me, Mr. Sanderson.
Good afternoon, Mr. Ho. My name is Ian Sanderson. I represent the University of Hawaii.
Yes.
To ask a few questions. On page 9 of your, at least what I have is page 9 of your written direct testimony in response to cross-examination by Ms. Pishoda, you stated that the courts, I believe both federal and state courts, have ruled for civil rights of Native Hawaiians and against political cronyism, right? Is that what you said?
I said that the Supreme Court in December 2015 recognized that the Hawaiians have special rights above and beyond the regular citizenry of the state.
Doesn't it say in your direct written testimony that the courts have ruled 5 times for civil rights of Hawaiians and cultural practitioners? They have ruled against the political cronyism that past state decision makers have catered to.
Yes, I do state that.
Okay. And then don't you cite 5 examples of those rulings? On the next
Yes,
page?
I do.
I have it as page 10.
Ah, I see. I have it as page 7, but I did enumerate 5 examples, yes.
And when you were looking at those examples, did you look at the recent Hawaii Supreme Court decision dated October 6, 2016, confirming the Board of Land and Natural Resources granting of a conservation district use permit to the solar telescope on Haleakala?
No, I'm not familiar with that ruling.
Okay. It is Exhibit C40 in the current contested case. On page 3, and I think you referred to it many times in the response to cross-examination questions, page 3 of your written direct testimony, you cite the 1998 state auditor's report concerning management of Mauna Kea. Is that correct?
I do cite that report, yes.
Are you aware that the 2014 follow-up audit of the management of Mauna Kea found that the UH and DLNR have addressed many of our, that being the auditor's, recommendations, including developing and implementing management plans for Mauna Kea's natural, cultural, and historic resources that result in an improved and more comprehensive framework that coordinates the agency's efforts to manage and protect Mauna Kea while balancing the competing interests of culture, conservation, scientific research, and recreation?
I believe the auditor did write that.
Okay, thank you. You testified in response, you testified in response to cross-examination by Ms. Pashota that you were particularly concerned about the industrial development associated with the Smithsonian submillimeter array. Is that correct?
Yes, I did.
And you said that that you described the Smithsonian submillimeter array to include a network of roads, a giant forklift, and many antennas that are sprawling over a 1/2 mile area.
Yes, I did state that.
Yes. And in your written direct testimony, you refer to concerns about the urbanization of the summit of Mauna Kea. Would that be an example of that urbanization?
Yes, that term was Mrs. Mulls, and yes, I did state that.
Do you believe that that is an example of the urbanization?
No, I like to use the industrialization.
So that's those are industrial activities.
Yes.
And is it correct that the Smithsonian Submillimeter Observatory is, one edge of it is located at the base of Pu'upoliahu and roughly also the base of Kukuhaula?
Yes, they are footings there that the Hawaiians objected to, yes.
And is the remainder of the 1/2 mile sprawl located on the northern plateau?
Yes.
Thank you. You state in your written direct testimony that you first began to publicly voice concern about development of Mauna Kea in 1995.
That's correct.
And that you were concerned about debris that was in the summit area on Mauna Kea at that time?
Yes, trash being blown around and impinging into the natural area reserve and the shrines.
And then you further stated in your written direct testimony that in 1998, because of your public involvement, you were invited to participate in the Mauna Kea Advisory Committee by the University of Hawaii. Is that correct?
Yes, Mr. Mortimer, President Mortimer sent me a letter asking me to participate.
And during that time, between 1998 between 1995, when you first began public involvement in 1998, did you make many trips to the summit of Mauna Kea?
Actually, as often as I could. Didn't own a four-wheel drive then, but as you know, when the opportunity presented itself, I tried to go to the summit.
Did any of those trips involve participants that are currently in this contested case? For example, Debbie Ward, Kealoha Pashota, or Paul Nevis?
Yes.
So they went with you?
Yes.
Did you meet with them to express concerns or to think about public concern about Mauna Kea during that time period?
Yes, on the mountain and elsewhere, yes.
Okay. And as you formed those thoughts and with that group of people, did you meet with anybody else? Did you express concerns to legislators?
Yes. Yes, we presented testimony when there were Mauna Kea-related bills, yes.
Did you ever meet privately with legislators?
You know, it's hard to distinguish. Yes, I did meet privately with them as a Sierra Club, and Mauna Kea would be one of many issues that we touched on.
Okay. And did you ever meet or discuss these issues with your concerns with the state auditor?
Well, to Miss Marian Higa, not directly, but Sierra Club did send, over almost a foot thick worth of papers and documents that we submitted when we found out they were doing an audit of Mauna Kea.
And did you meet with any UH officials?
Yes, at various times.
And which ones were they?
The IFA directors, Ralph Peter Kudrytsky, I mentioned Donald Hall. Those were the two with IFA. Chancellor Rose Sang, and various other people. Mr. McLaren, if he's still in the audience, I've spoken with him.
And did any of did Kayla Pashota or Paul Nevis or Debbie Ward or any of the other current petitioners participate in any of those meetings?
I'm sure there is a lot of them.
Did you ever meet with any DLNR officials?
Yes, I've presented testimony before several different boards of land and natural resources, yes.
And did you ever meet with the office, personnel at the Office of Conservation and Coastal Lands?
Yes, when they conducted hearings in the public, I would meet with them.
But did you ever correspond or voice any of your concerns to them in an email or a letter or anything? Was there any correspondence back and forth?
You know, if I did, I don't recall.
Did you ever meet with any Board of Land and Natural Resources members?
Yes, past and present.
And did you meet with them did you meet with them individually outside of the testimony, outside of a public hearing?
Over the years, I'm sure I have. I can't recall any specific meeting.
And can you recall ever meeting with a chair of the Department of Land and of the chair of the Board of Land and Natural Resources? I met Mr. William Isla. Haven't met Suzanne Case. I met Mr. Susumu Ono back in the day. Can't remember the others offhand. Not Mr. Mehal. Not Mr. Mehal. In your written direct testimony, which I will bear with me for a moment. You state on what I have as page 4 that historical records show that UH and DLNR officials promoted astronomy over environmental and cultural concerns with the support and under pressure from power political operatives. And then you proceed to list a number of people, starting with Senator Daniel Noe, every governor, including John Burns, Ben Cayetano and Neil Abercrombie, Larry Mehal, chair of the Board of Natural Resources. I have it on page 4.
Yes.
And all other BLNL chairs, including William Isla and Suzanne Case. How did you learn that these people were exerting pressure to promote astronomy over environmental and cultural concerns?
Through their official decisions and the statements they made in public.
Did you ever meet with any other BLNR chairs besides William Isla?
Not that I can recall at the moment. Okay. Excuse me, one more. Mike Wilson, when he was chair.
You met with Mike Wilson when he was chair?
Yes.
And what do you recall about that meeting?
I recall that I brought up the issue of what I felt was wrong with the management and what was going on at the summit. And one of his responses was to control access, public access, as a response to that. And I had to argue with him that it was not the public creating the larger disturbances, it was the construction of the astronomy, the international astronomy industry that was creating the problems that I was bringing to his attention.
Do you recall when the meeting with Mr. Wilson occurred?
Within the first year and a half of his being appointed director of DLNR.
So that would be sometime after the spring of 1995 and through 1996.
Sometime after, I cannot recall the exact date.
Do you recall where that meeting was occurred?
You know, not even with certainty which island. At that time, I was traveling to Oahu, so it could have happened there or on his visits here to this island. I don't recall.
Okay, but it was a meeting that was a meeting where you met individually with Mr. Wilson to express your concerns about the management of Mauna Kea?
Yes, I had that opportunity.
And besides the discussion about limiting public access, what did Mr. Wilson say to you in response to your concerns?
Well, that he would look into, you know, the other aspects, the other issues that I had raised. Basically, those two subjects.
And did he express sympathy or understanding or concern about the issues that you were raising?
Yes, he did.
And how did he do that?
Verbally to me.
And do you recall what his comments were?
Not specifically. He never wrote about it, but the end result was I think the department did not pursue any public access restrictions at that time.
Mm-hmm. And do you recall corresponding with him after that occurred at all?
I probably did, but I don't have any copies of that at this point.
But there probably are copies in the record somewhere.
I believe there would be.
Thank you very much. I have no further questions.
Thank you, Mr. Sanderson. Mr. Ng?
Oh, can I take that back? I do have a further question.
Oh, sorry.
I apologize. In response to I think in your written direct testimony and also in response to cross-examination, I believe from Ms. Freitas, you expressed concern about the lack of broken promises by DLNR and the university in terms of proceeding with cultural and natural resources studies and biological studies. Is that correct?
Yes, I stated that.
Could I show you what is already in the record as Exhibit A22, which is the 2016 university report to the Board of Land and Natural Resources regarding its activities under the Comprehensive Management Plan? And if you would, could you put it on the overhead projector?
Sure. Mm-hmm.
Could you familiarize yourself and take a look at what that document states, and that's page 7 of 37 from Exhibit A22.
Yes, I see that document listed as such.
And is that a summary of research activities, surveys, and studies regarding arthropods, geology and erosion, climate and weather, surveys of human activities and needs, ongoing surveys and studies of the VECU bug and alien invasive species, and then other studies?
Yes, and I believe those are the studies that were referred to in the 1983 master plan and was explicitly told would be done to people like Dr. Fred Stone and the other people who were concerned early on that these kind of baseline studies should have begun in the 80s.
And would you agree that at this point those studies are either completed or underway?
Yes, I do.
Thank you. Now I have no further questions.
Mr. Ng? Before you proceed, I did note the appearance of Ms. Kakalia. Is it your intention to cross-examine this witness? Then I'm going to ask you to go now. Mr. Ng, pardon me, I'm going to let Ms. Kakalia go first. And Ms. Kakalia, may we note your appearance this afternoon at 1:15?
12:30.
Okay,
I
that
walked
was
in at 12:30.
it was during the lunch hour.
Yeah.
All right, thank you.
Aloha, Nelson.
Aloha.
Mahalo for being here. I just have a few questions.
Yes.
Have you attended many OMKMB meetings?
Yes, I have. As many as I could.
Have you given testimony or expressed concerns directly to this management board?
Yes, I have.
Has there ever been any follow-through regarding your concerns expressed at these meetings?
I think they noted them, and I know some items were passed on to Kahuku-Mauna, and I think others were just noted for the record and left on the
With
table.
no resolve?
Correct.
How long did it take for the items that were addressed? How long of a time span was that from when you informed the board of your concerns to when either they pass it on or let you know what next steps might be?
Well, I guess I only remembered the stuff that wasn't done.
Okay.
And one of them was a library made available at OMKM, the office, for the public to use. That would be sort of a spot where all the data about Mauna Kea
Right.
was collected and could be viewed. That still hasn't been
Has
done.
it? Okay, mahalo.
That's just one of them. I forgot the rest.
Okay, thank you. Would you say that that the Office of Mauna Kea Management's administration is aware of your extensive knowledge of the Mauna?
Yes, I've had conversations with several directors.
Have you attended any Kauku Mauna Council meetings?
No, I have not.
So you wouldn't have given any testimony on cultural matters or brought concerns to directly their advisory council versus through the managing board?
Not formally to the board. I have friends on Kahuku-Mauna, and I would just send them my concerns, in a private email or a conversation.
Thank you. Have you been invited to address any cultural matters, including the development of policy, with anyone from Kahuku-Mauna or even Office of Mauna Kea Management for that matter?
As a member of the public, yes, I've participated in the latest round where Kahuku-Mauna came out with a preliminary set of rules or a proposal on how to treat cultural features.
But that wasn't a specific invite to you to come and talk story about it. It was a public forum.
Correct, it was a public forum.
Thank you. I have no other questions.
Okay.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Kakalia. Mr. Ng?
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
So you've got two testimonies, two written direct testimonies in the record. And the first was prepared and it's dated October 2016. Is that correct?
Yes.
And the second is dated December 26, 2016.
Yes.
Okay. So why did you change your testimony?
I was always dissatisfied with the October version. I considered that a draft, and I rushed it to meet a deadline. And that's it.
So you waited until December 26 to revise it?
That's when I finished revising it, yes.
Okay. So why didn't you provide it to Ms. Slightholm at that time?
I guess I had some personal issues. There was a death in the family, and I did not follow through at the time. I dropped the ball on that.
Okay. Did anyone tell you not to provide it until later?
I guess there were previous conversations earlier that there was time to present it, and
who were those conversations with?
Ms. Slightholm and other petitioners in this proceeding.
Who were those other petitioners?
I can't recall specifically.
Okay. But what you understood from them was that you had additional time to submit.
That's correct.
Amended testimony.
Correct.
Okay. So why did you wait until February 12th to submit your changes?
Because I thought I was under the assumption, well, I didn't want to bother Mrs. Slightholm. I knew she was going through some very challenging times with her husband's health, and just concluded on my own that I had missed the window to send in my revision.
Okay, but you're very familiar with Debbie Ward?
Yes, I am.
You could have submitted them to her, couldn't you?
I'm not her witness.
But she has access to the hearing. There have been filings made by other parties on behalf of other parties.
I'm not aware of that.
Okay. You certainly know Mr. Nevis and Ms. Peixoto.
Yes, I do.
Okay. So did you enlist their support in trying to get that testimony into the record?
No, I did not.
Okay. Any reason why you did not?
It didn't occur to me.
Okay. How about Mr. Ching? You know Mr. Ching from a long while ago.
Yes, I do.
Did you talk to him about it?
No, I did not.
Are you and Ms. Ward still members of the Sierra Club?
Yes, we are.
Do you see her frequently?
Not enough, no. I can't say I do.
Did you discuss the changes that you made to your testimony with any of the parties to this proceeding?
The specifics of the changes?
Yes.
No.
Am I correct in that you primarily made additions to your testimony as opposed to deletions to the version that was dated October 2016?
I try to focus it more. I try to make it clearer and relevant both to a general reader and to the hearings officer.
So you added a section entitled "The Political Underbelly of Mauna Kea Telescope Development."
Yes, I did.
Is that what you felt was relevant and of interest to the broader community?
Yes.
Why is that?
I believe it's not generally known, and I had witnessed it, and I wanted to share that with the larger Mauna Kea Ohana and put it on the record.
But your witnessing of it came as a result of the decisions of the various governmental agencies.
Yes.
Wasn't that available to the rest of the public at the same time?
I don't think so.
Why do you not think so?
Because the people that I've interacted with in the last few years were unaware of the details, and so I wanted to write them down when I still remembered them.
So, but would you agree that those people have access to public records?
Generally, yes.
And if they're not provided on request, you can resort to the courts to obtain those records, correct?
Yes.
Now, you refer to Mr. Mehau as the chair of the Board of Land and Natural Resources.
I do.
Is that correct?
Yes.
Wasn't Mr. William Thompson the chair of the board during the time that Mr. Mehau served on the board?
I recall his name. I also thought that Mr. Mehau was a chair, a director.
Okay. Do you understand that the director of the Department of Land and Natural Resources serves as the chair?
Yes.
Was Mr. Mehau ever the director of the Department of Land and Natural Resources?
I thought he was.
So you have been a long-standing opponent of development in the Conservation District. Is that a fair statement?
On Mauna Kea, yes.
How about elsewhere?
In the forest, the rainforest of Kaho'olea, yes. And I believe you were on the land board when those contested case hearings were going on.
And you were part of the interveners in that proceeding?
Yes, I participated in the very first contested case hearing held in this state before DLNR, before Mr. Ono.
And I believe that May and Bill Mull were also participants. They weren't parties, but they were witnesses, correct?
I believe you're correct.
And would it be fair to say that your involvement on behalf of yourself and the Sierra Club as well has always been from the environmental concerns.
Yes.
It is also fair to say that your concerns and issues with regard to development of telescopes on Mauna Kea is related to environmental concerns, the biota, the fauna.
It started there, yes.
Okay. During the course of the 1980s, did you attend any of the land board meetings with regard to development of telescopes on Mauna Kea?
No, I did not. And because of that, I was chastised by Mr. Chris Ewan that in 95, when I did appear on Mauna Kea, that I was too late.
Did you have a discussion with Mr. Ewan at that time?
Yes, I did.
Did he serve as the chair of DLNR?
He was on the board. I don't know if he was the chair. He was the Big Island representative.
Now, I want to go to page 2. I'm afraid this is of your initial testimony. And I'm sure I can find it in your amended testimony. But it's the first instance where you talk about industrialization.
Okay.
And your pages are not numbered, so I'm having a little bit difficulty finding it.
And I do apologize for not numbering that.
Well, let me read you what you said from your initial testimony, because that's the one I worked off of. You said, my early mentors were May and Bill Mull, who were concerned about the urbanization of the summit.
Yes.
You recall making that statement?
Yes, I do.
Okay. And do you agree with that statement?
I don't like to characterize it as urbanization, but that's the word that they used for many years about the overdevelopment that they saw and they spoke against.
Okay, that overdevelopment that you just mentioned, you're referring to the development of astronomy facilities?
Yes.
Okay. Well, you went on to say, and to quote Peli Hanoa.
Yes, she's one of my kupuna.
Okay. And you state here that she called it the industrialization of the summit.
I believe that's true.
Okay, so is it fair to say you agree with her statement?
Yes.
And are you calling it industrialization because of the astronomy facilities that have been developed at the summit?
Well, you know, in high school and college, I used to work in Iwalei on Oahu, and I call that pretty industrial. I worked in the pineapple canneries in the summer, and I was around forklifts and in warehouses, and there was a lot of activity that I would classify processing and manufacturing of food and things like that. So that's my experience.
So, can you answer my question?
Which was?
Is the reason you call it industrialization the development of the astronomy facilities on the summit? Is that the reason you call it industrialization?
Because of the impacts that I've observed of the facilities there, yes.
Okay. And those impacts include the use of diesel generators, which is what you referenced earlier today.
I do, and the noise and the fumes and the activity of ancillary vehicles coming and going at 24 hours a day.
Anything else that you?
The lasers that are now operating up there, it's not something you'd find in a residential area. None of those activities.
Are there any other reasons that you refer to it as industrialization besides what you've already mentioned?
I can't think of any at the moment.
Now, again, this is on page 3 of your initial testimony, but let me see if I can find it. Okay, this appears at the middle of page 6 of your amended testimony. You referred to a discussion that you had with Dr. Henry Yang and Dr. Jean-Luc Chimel.
Yes, I do.
And Dr. Michael Bolte.
Yes.
And they were all associated with the TMT project.
That's correct.
Okay, and this took place sometime in 2007.
That's correct.
And with you at the time were Ms. Pichota, Mr. Nevis, and Mr. Ching.
That's correct.
And this was a 3-hour discussion?
Yes, I believe so.
And you earlier testified in response to questions by others that you had discussed your concerns about mismanagement?
Yes, all of us did.
And did you also discuss concerns about Native Hawaiians?
Yes.
And practitioners?
Yes.
And were those concerns expressed by Mr. Nevis and Ms. Pichota?
Yes.
How about Mr. Ching?
Yes.
Okay. Would it be fair to characterize that meeting as consultation?
I don't know.
You understand what consultation is?
I think it's a more formal process with recordation of outcomes or conversations and agreements, and I do not believe that this rises to that level.
Did you take notes during the course of that?
I did not.
Did anyone take notes during the course of that?
I don't recall.
Now at the, let's see, page 5 of your original testimony, you expressed some criticisms of the EIS and EIS process. Now, that is... Okay, so it looks like you have this on page 9 of your amended testimony.
Okay, I see that.
So did you participate in the TMT EIS process?
Yes.
And what did that participation consist of?
Submission, well, review of the draft documents, submitting written and oral comments to the draft, and reviewing the final EIS.
And those comments were submitted on behalf of the Sierra Club?
Yeah, I believe so.
And Ms. Ward signed that letter as well?
I believe so.
Okay, and so that was a 19-page comment letter, correct?
I believe so.
Okay. And when the final environmental impact statement was published and noticed, that both your comments as well as the responses to those comments were included in volume 2 of the final environmental impact statement, correct?
I believe they were.
Okay. Now, you had other criticisms about the OMKM process. So this is at page 8 of your amended testimony. And you indicate that the OMKM Environment Committee was never convened to review the TMT EIS. You recall that?
Yes.
Okay, who was on the OMKM Environment Committee at the time?
I believe Debbie Ward was.
Okay. Do you think her review of the OMKM, her review as a member of the OMKM Environment Committee would have been any different than her review of the draft EIS as a member of the CR Club?
I could not say how she would respond.
Okay. Is it fair to say that she contributed substantially to the Sierra Club letter that both you and she signed?
Yes.
Would it be fair to say that she had an opportunity through that letter to comment on the draft EIS?
On the draft, yes.
Were you aware that the OMKM office itself did prepare comments on the draft EIS?
I do not recall.
Okay. I wonder if I could have Exhibit A4 provided to the witness. Could you turn to page 9 of 531 in that exhibit, which is marked as Exhibit A4?
Did you say page 531?
Page 9.
9.
Of 531. That's how it's numbered on the document.
Okay, I have page 9.
Now that you have page 9, could you look at page 8?
Yes.
Okay. Is that a comment letter on behalf of OMKM?
Yes, it's on its letterhead.
And does it consist of 5 pages of comments?
I believe so.
Okay. Now, who is Mr. Ron Terry?
Ron Terry is a friend of mine. Ron Terry is an environmental consultant. Ron Terry is a past board member of OMKM.
Do you know whether Mr. Terry, do you consider him a competent environmental planner?
Yes.
Do you know whether he submitted comments?
I do not.
You recall the period of time that he was a member of the OMKM board?
Yes, I do.
Do you turn to page 346 of Exhibit A4?
I have page 346.
Okay, is that a comment letter that was prepared by Mr. Terry writing to the preparers of the draft EIS on behalf of himself and as a member of the OMKM board? I'm sorry, the MKMB.
Yes.
Mr. Hall has already testified that he did not know whether Mr. Terry did or did not produce a letter of comment in these proceedings, so I'm not sure how he would comment. I'm not sure exactly the purpose of the question to a document that he did not know was presented, so.
I'm
my
refreshing his recollection.
Overruled, go ahead.
What was the question, please?
First of all, is that a letter which appears to be drafted by Mr. Ron Terry on behalf of himself and as a member of the Mauna Kea Management Board?
Yes, and I recognize his handwriting in the signature.
Okay, based on the comments submitted by you on behalf of Sierra Club along with Ms. Ford, who was a member of the 1KM Environment Committee, based upon the comment letters submitted by OMKM, and based upon the comment letters submitted by Mr. Ron Terry as a member of the board, would it be fair to say that the Office of Mauna Kea Management had an opportunity to review and comment on the draft EIS?
Your Honor, again, I don't think he's established that. It refreshes his recollection as to whether he knows that Mr. Terry had submitted comment on this, so I'm not sure he's made that connection, Your Honor, so I still would object.
Mr. Ng?
Well, does that refresh your recollection as to whether or not Mr. Terry submitted comments to the draft EIS for the TMT project?
Well, here today I see that it was part of the record.
The objection.
And you were
Your Honor, I still don't believe that refreshes his recollection that he knew that Mr. Terry submitted testimony during the comment period, so I don't believe he's made that, Mr. Ng has made that connection.
Okay, but he stated that having reviewed this, he now understands, and this is for foundational purposes, that Mr. Terry did submit a letter.
And that was the basis of my ruling. I believe it's foundational. So I'm going to overrule and ask Mr. Ng to continue.
Yes, I see that the letter is here.
So the question was, based on Deborah Ward's comments in her letter, which you co-authored on behalf of the Sierra Club, based
Yes.
on OMKM's comments to the draft EIS, and based on Mr. Terry's comments to the draft EIS for the TMT project, would it be fair to say that OMKM had an opportunity to review and comment on the draft EIS?
Yes.
So in response to questions with regard to your statements about the judicial system, which appear at page 7 of your amended written direct testimony, 7 and 8, I'm sorry, you admitted to Mr. Sanderson that you had not read the Kila Kila decision.
That's correct.
Okay, why is that? Wasn't Sierra Club interested in following that decision?
Definitely, and there are other people that were tracking that closer than I.
Okay. But isn't Kila Kila the Hawaii Supreme Court's latest statement and holding with regard to development of astronomy facilities in conservation districts?
I don't know.
Do you plan to read the Kila Kila decision?
After you mentioned it today, I'll try and look it up.
I want to go to page, I'm sorry, my references all go to the former testimony. It's page 3 of your initial testimony, and Okay, I can't seem to locate it on your amended testimony, but let me see if you recall making this statement. I think in reference to your comments about Pelihanoa, you stated that in particular she conveyed to you in 1995 that she wanted the use of unlined cesspools to be stopped.
She made that statement, and I'm referencing my page 5 in the middle,
Okay.
my amended version, where I bring that up, and it's the third paragraph down, where I reference 2 elders that are kupuna of mine. And as soon as I became visible in 1995 speaking out on Mauna Kea, Ms. Hanoa, who I've known for years, called me up and expressly told me to tell the DLNR to stop using unlined cesspools. And I did convey that to DLNR.
Okay. Let me ask you this in follow-up. Does the use of a zero discharge wastewater system mitigate the discharge of wastewater directly into the ground?
You know, I don't know the use of zero waste, zero discharge. I am familiar with the typical septic tank system, which does allow the liquids to drain off into the ground even while the solids are captured. So I would assume that zero discharge means even the liquids are captured.
That's correct.
Okay.
If even the liquids are captured
Correct.
in addition to the solids.
Okay.
And they are removed by pump and trucked off the summit.
Okay.
So is it fair to say that the use of that type of zero discharge system mitigates the impacts related to cesspools at the summit?
Yes, it would, and I hope that all of the cesspools are now such designated zero discharge.
I have just a few more questions. Now, in response to questions from Ms. Pashota, you stated that your understanding of cumulative impacts being significant, adverse, and substantial is that you don't proceed unless those impacts have been reduced to less than significant. Is that a fair statement of what you said earlier today?
Yes, that's my lay understanding of it.
And does that lay understanding form the basis for many of your objections and concerns with regard to development at Mauna Kea?
Some of the concerns is addressed by that.
Okay. And what is your source for the basis of that statement?
I guess conversations I had and readings many years ago.
In conversations with whom?
The petitioners at that time.
Are you referring to the Outrigger case?
Yes, I am.
And based on that, and do you recall what you read that led you to that conclusion?
Not right now. I can't recall. I don't recall.
Is it fair to say if your conclusion about that statement is wrong, that that would undercut many of the objections you have with regard to development of astronomy facilities at Mauna Kea?
No, because I would want them mitigated
Irrespective
of
what you
of my definition. Thank you.
So you would prefer that mitigation occur beyond the requirements of the current law?
Yes, and I state that in my direct testimony.
Thank you, Mr. Ho. That's all I have.
Thank you,
Thank
Mr. Ing. Mr. Kaihama, redirect. And that would be for Ms. Lightholm.
Mr. Ho, in response to the question asked to you by Mr. Sanderson, you recall him asking you about the 1998 auditor's report,
Yes.
and then referring you to in fact, the follow-up 2014 report by the auditor.
Yes.
And he talked about, and I think he read from it, and I'm sorry I don't have it, but my recollection is that there was a finding that many of the concerns were addressed. Do you recall?
Yes.
Somewhat that kind of statement. Do you know what concerns weren't addressed?
You know, I did not like the findings of that one because I did look at that report at the time and felt that there were significant areas that were not corrected yet.
Okay, and can you explain what areas that they might have been?
The areas in the actual programs to study the biology. It was underway, or contracts were made, but there were no results in, and we did not know the details of how those studies were going to be done, and that they were years late.
Okay. Mr. Sanderson also at that time brought up a graph of studies that had been undertaken or conducted, and I believe your testimony was that was, and forgive me, I think you said promises that were made as part of the 1983 management report. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. I noticed on the diagram that, I'm not sure if you noticed, did you notice the dates that most of those studies were either conducted or underway?
Yeah, 2012, 2013, maybe 2011.
Okay. So in connection with the TMT, is it fair to say that most of those studies were conducted post the initial application in 2010?
Yes.
Thank you. Mr. Sanderson also asked you about some questions about the Smithsonian submillimeter array.
Yes.
And I think the words that were used was urbanization or industrialization.
Yes.
He spoke about, and I don't know if you recall, but I think he spoke about, I had some questions about some of that Smithsonian array being located on the northern plateau. Do you recall that?
Yes, I recall.
Okay. The TMT, Mr. Ho, or the proposed TMT, what is your opinion about the proposed TMT in relation to the questions Mr. Sanders asked you about the sprawl on the northern territory, the northern plateau, excuse me.
It opens up a whole new area for the industrialization of that landscape.
Okay, an area previously untouched.
Correct.
Thank you.
I believe there was only one 4x4 road that at one time had an antenna on it,
Okay.
which has been removed.
He also asked you some questions quickly concerning Mr. Wilson as, at that time, the chair of the DLNR.
Yes.
And I thought I heard you correctly, and please correct me. I understood your response at that time when you had conversations with him is you essentially had an opposing view from Mr. Wilson's view, is that correct?
Yes.
Okay, all righty. And then you expressed concerns regarding your opposing view to Mr. Wilson's?
Yes.
Okay, thank you. Concerning, I'm going to now direct your attention to some of the cross-examination questions asked by Mr. Ng. And forgive me, I think I'm referring to page I have it as page 9 of your amended. I'm not exactly sure, and I'm referring to the management tokenism and directing the blame on the public, the OMKM Environmental Committee.
I have that as page 8.
Okay. And Mr. Ng did ask you some questions, and I think you confirmed upon reviewing it finally here that I think his questions were, did the OMKM in fact provide comment to the EIS process? Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. My question to you, sir, is that in fact what you expressed concern in your written direct testimony? Is that the concern you expressed?
No.
Okay, what was the concern that you expressed concerning the OMKM?
My concern was that OMKM was never a representative set of the Big Island community, including the Hawaiian cultural practitioners and the average resident. It was a selected subset of the population that was really invested in continuing the development and the use of Mauna Kea as an astronomy facility.
Okay, concerning your comment that's in your written direct testimony, OMKM Environment Committee was never convened to review the TMT EIS. What did you mean by that? That comment in your written direct testimony?
Well, through discussions with Debbie Ward, who was on it, they were the subcommittee that would input to the OMKM board, and they were selected for their environmental expertise. And so they never got to opine on the qualities or defects of that draft EIS.
Thank you. Mr. Ng also asked you about the zero discharge.
Yes.
And I believe your answer is your understanding was that none of the solids or liquids would actually, forgive me, I'm not sure, escape but would drip, but in fact all of it would be contained. Is that correct?
Yes.
And then I believe his question is that it would then be pumped and then into a truck and then taken away. Is that correct?
Yes.
While I think you expressed some satisfaction with the zero discharge, and I'm not sure if satisfaction is the right word, are there other concerns?
Absolutely.
Can you explain what those concerns
First
might
of all, I want to thank the university for going to that step. If it is zero discharge, it's absolutely the way to go. But that ignores the previous 50 years of use of unlined cesspools, where waste matter and possibly cleaning chemicals used to clean the mirrors would go down the drain and therefore leach into the ground below the telescope facilities. So to me, a complete mitigation would be to examine at least all of the unlined cesspool locations to see in fact what was discharged into them, where did they migrate, and removal if necessary.
Okay. Help me understand. I think your answer just prompted some questions for me. So if I understand correctly, it is the proposed TMT project that has the zero discharge. Is that my understanding correct?
That's my understanding.
Okay. So as of this time, there are 13 other telescopes on there that I don't know. What is their status as far as discharge is concerned? Do you know?
Well, it is a concern of mine, and I've asked that question at OMKM several times, and the answer I got was that they were phasing out the unlined cesspools and putting in septic tanks with leach fields, not the zero waste ones. So I hope I can be corrected or information can be brought forth. But I think for such a culturally significant landscape that you would want every facility to have a zero discharge septic tank system, because the normal one that I worked with as deputy director, all you had to do was capture the solids, and you would allow the liquid portion to go back into what was the unlined cesspool, thereby continuing any contamination on the summit. So I didn't want to see that in operation, but would much rather have, if there's going to be any human waste disposal, that it all be removed.
And if you can explain for me, when you said your understanding is that some of these septic tanks, the plan was to have some of these septic tanks with leach fields. I don't understand that, so if you can explain that to me. What is that, and are there concerns with that design or that proposal?
Yes. What's done in the lower elevations is you capture the biosolids, the stuff that's not liquid, and you pump those out in the honey wagon, and you remove them, and that's done periodically because it builds up. But there's a lot of liquid waste that goes into the septic system, and that's allowed by law to just be drained off and disposed of locally. So that, and I don't know this, could still be happening in the facilities that have a conventional septic system that is non-zero discharge.
Okay. So with respect to the proposed TMT and the zero discharge, though, is there still any concerns in your mind concerning the pumping and then transporting of that waste material off the mountain?
Well, there are recorded incidents throughout that where there is pumping, there has been accidents. And so I know that on the summit, there was a spill of that pumped sewage out of a tanker that was removing it, and so that spilled on the summit. And I also know that there were spillage incidences down at Halepohaku at the mid-level facilities where doing cleanouts, there was also contaminated discharge onto the ground.
Okay. Finally, in response to some of the questions that Mr. Ng asked you, and I believe it had to do with some of the meetings and proceedings that you attended along with Ms. Peixoto, Mr. Neves, Ms. Ward, and I believe perhaps might have included Ku on that. My question to you is that the testimony that you've submitted through these years, and the opinions that you have given through these years, and when I say through these years, is in your participation in the development on Mauna Kea, and I think it goes back a few decades. The testimony that you have provided, whose testimony was that?
Well, mine.
Okay. Thank you, Your Honor. No further redirect questions.
Thank you, Mr. Kayama. Thank you very much, Mr. Ho. You're released.
Thank you.
All right. Mr. Kayama, excuse me. Will you also be offering the next witness on behalf of Ms. Lightholm?